There we go. Back to recording. Okay. Share screen. And let's try this again. All right. So yeah, we record these. They go on the Atlanta Area Evaluation Association YouTube page. So even though I know you two, I'm going to introduce myself anyway, just for fun. So yeah, I'm Chris Vogel. I am the current president of the Atlanta Area Evaluation Association. And welcome to our 21st Journal Club meeting, session, whatever we're going to call it. This particular month, we are looking at an article. I remember this is from HAE, right? Yeah, the American Journal of Evaluation, um, exploring use and influence in culturally responsive approaches to evaluation, a review of the empirical literature. If you've joined us before, you know that I'm a huge fan of any sort of systematic review, meta-analyses, all that jazz. So seeing this one popped up, I knew I just had to hop in on it. There were a couple things that I really liked about this article. I'd also love to call out things that I think they did really well. And definitely one they did was laying out the distinction between the different types of evaluation use, and even going much more beyond the normal dichotomy that is presented, the process use and results-based use, and that they really identified the many subdivisions of those and explained why they were important, what purpose they serve, both the stakeholders and the people involved in the evaluation, and then also what they don't achieve sometimes, especially with results-based approaches. And then the discussion section, I really thought was well written, and I'm going to preface that just by, or follow that up by saying it was obvious that the people that wrote that had a really good understanding of the complexity of these issues. And by complexity, I'm saying that I had to reread it like 3 times to actually understand, or at least partially understand what they were saying. So top notch, I guess. The article is done by Jeremy Acree, hopefully I'm saying that right, and Jill and Chouinard. I don't know if either one of you two know how to pronounce that last name. So I apologize, Jill, if I butchered it there. But we'll hop right in it. Like any good article, they really start off by mentioning, what is culturally responsive evaluation. They even actually had a step before this, just what is culture? And it was just another great review of the literature on how that term and even the definition, its applicability have changed over time. But these were 3 that I stole out of the manuscript. That cultural responsiveness is a collaborative practice in which stakeholders and evaluators co-construct evaluation questions, concepts, and design. So yeah, focusing a lot on that co-creation of evaluation. And then a definition, I don't know if it's a definition, but a further explanation by Chouinard and the good old Rodney Hobson. Evaluators are called upon to acknowledge the limitations and influences of their own perspectives, to reflect on the cultural implications of inquiry, and to think critically about how knowledge is constructed within culturally diverse contexts. And then finally, an often cited aim of cultural responsiveness is the bridging of cultural differences to produce evaluative findings, which are valid based on local ways of knowing and making meaning. The sentence that actually followed this up also noted that evaluators usually take 1 of 2 steps with this, trying to bridge this cultural difference. At least the way they wrote it, it made it seem like it was almost 2 camps, to where you could have somebody that, I don't want to say culturally competent, because that's kind of loaded these days, but they were at least competent enough to be able to work effectively with the group, or you needed a representative from that group. So that was like the other, I don't know if it was even a divide so much as just 2 ways of approaching it. But, so additional points to consider here. I think I took this out of the culture section, but the culture is not only a subject or an object of research and evaluation, but also it informs and shapes the values, philosophies, and methodologies of research, including the researchers themselves. Culture should not be studied as a static notion, but as a sense-making, as a reality constructed and displayed by those whose its existence is embedded in a particular set of webs. And that's where I feel like a lot of the definitions of culture focus on nowadays, right, is this idea of sense making. Okay, nobody's hopped in yet. That's okay. The purpose and goal of this systematic review. The purpose they identified was to explore the notions of use and influence in empirical studies of culturally responsive practice and evaluation. Their stated goal, to better understand how use and influence are conceptualized by evaluators intent on practicing cultural responsiveness as a way to, I always butcher this word, ameliorate. Yes, okay, I think I got that. Ameliorate social injustices and affect social and political change. So this is just a super brief part of what I was getting at with this. They did a really good job of defining these types of uses, but I feel like this is usually how it's presented in a lot of eval textbooks, but they did a really further deep dive into this and categorized it by many other points that I really could have spent the whole 30 minutes talking about, but because I only have 15 minutes to talk, I just break them up. So the types of use that they talk about here: process use, where these are individual changes in thinking and behavior that occur among those involved in the evaluation as a result of the learning that occurs during the evaluation process. So, right, not how a process evaluation is used so much as that there is a use of going through the process of doing an evaluation. I'm most familiar with something like an empowerment evaluation, where you have a group learn how to, but also perform the evaluation. And by doing that, the outcome might be important, but it's also the process of gaining those new skills of taking power back from whatever situation you're in to be able to have some sort of control and influence over your own life. So that's an example of a process use. Where results-based use is probably what we think of most commonly, at least in federal work, where its evaluation results are used for instrumental, conceptual, and or symbolic. They always caveated symbolic here with persuasive. I don't know why I had symbolic there twice. That was my bad. For symbolic reasons here. So that the idea that we are doing an evaluation to get results, to inform something, to improve something, to persuade somebody that the program needs X, Y, or Z. The studies they picked for their systematic review, they had to be community-based program evaluations. They had to take place in North America, and I think all of them took place in the US, but 2 that took place in Canada. Had to consider culture a key variable of interest, be based primarily on empirical research, and then in their write-up, they had to highlight culturally based approaches, findings, or lessons learned. So finally, 24 were selected. And really, they broke it up into 3 different categories here. They had the rationales that the authors used for culturally responsive approaches, and I'll go back through. I just want to give instances of evaluation use, and then instances of evaluation influence. So this is what they're trying to identify in here. The rationales for culturally responsive approaches, that methods of inquiry should reflect the context, culture, and aims of the programs that they are evaluating. That, right, and we'll get into this when I have the discussion question at the end. But right, it's this idea that, you know, evaluation isn't like a medical treatment. It uses an adaptive methodology, they say, because it has to. That every context is different, no matter if it's the same program. It just depends so much on the area. So, and the people involved in the culture, that the methods of inquiry need to reflect these differences. So evaluation has aims of empowerment, inclusivity, cultural sensitivity, multicultural validity, and advocacy. And then also another rationale is the desire for evaluation to lead to increased advocacy, the social betterment, and justice. So out of these 24, these are the reasons why the authors explicitly stated they used a culturally responsive approach. Instances of evaluation use. They did categorize these somewhat, but there ended up being a lot of different reasons for evaluation use, and very well could be that there were the same uses multiple times in each one. It's not like, I imagine it's not each evaluation only had one of these uses. But you can see that the results-based uses are exactly what we would think of with results-based in general. Satisfy the funder demands, legitimize a program, model or framework, increase the prestige of the program. So really all of these, I mean, and you can, I'm trying to think if there's any unique ones. I like the fourth one at the bottom. That one was a little bit different. The evaluations of similar, evaluations of similar reform models using critical race theory. So that was about the only one that we don't see every day, but just the standard results-based uses. But the authors did note that although results-based uses were really common in CRE, what was more prevalent was process use. And hopefully, and here I'm not really saying what the author said, but I'm rationalizing here, speaking on my own limited understanding, but that a lot of CRE comes down to just that, right? I mean, it's focused a lot on critical race theory and this idea of empowerment, social justice, the betterment of society, to where it's the participation in the process is hoping to benefit the people involved. But we see this here, right? The development of skills when the stakeholders were trained in evaluative methods, the sense of personal importance, the development of evaluative thinking, real-time learning, and this one I always find interesting. You know, there's a number of good articles talking about how this real-time learning really takes the form of whatever you want it to be. And by that, I mean, you can learn about the program, but sometimes evaluations, empowerment evaluations are used to teach people statistical skills, data management skills, groups that otherwise wouldn't have those skills previously. So besides real-time learning about their setting situation, there's also the opportunity to teach them job skills. And in that same vein, capacity building, development of trust in the administrative decision-making, and the empowerment of program beneficiaries. Oh, just you and I now, Empirical. That's okay. Instances of evaluation influence. Reflection appeared to be a catalyst for influence. So the authors are very clear about this, that it was really hard to untangle influence from use. But what they were able to figure out here, or at least notice, was that the reflection part, the reflective practice piece of evaluation appeared to cause a lot of these changes. That there are multiple shifts in perspective, understanding, and awareness of culture among themselves, stakeholders, and clients. And then these shifts often led to reflections about cultural positionality, I love that word, and new conceptualizations of data, research process, and the program being evaluated. So, and this one, this last line I just thought was on point here, that these findings indicate that the use of culturally responsive approaches may lead those involved in the evaluation to reflect on themselves, on their roles and values, and on the impact of culture on programmatic and evaluative processes and practices. Oh. I'm admitting Joy. Sorry. Joy, have you been waiting long? We'll wait for your audio. I never know if I can, when I'm, oh, now Joy's gone. For cola, this is why we can't have nice things. It starts being weird. Okay, so I had a couple discussion questions here, but this is the one that I often struggle with the most. And I don't know if it's just my own lack of understanding of CRE or if it's just the context in which I learned evaluation. But I have trouble distinguishing the difference between culturally responsive evaluation from just any evaluation following the AEA guiding principles and the evaluation program standards to the best of your ability, and maybe even better, to the best. That these components of reaching out, ensuring that there is authentic involvement by the stakeholders, that they help not only co-create it, but disseminate it, that it becomes part of their voice. Like, to me, all of those are best practices in any evaluation, and you try to do that as much as you can whenever you can. And I'm interested in, I guess, just that, right? How does culturally responsive evaluation go above and beyond what the principles and standards teach us? Is it a different form of evaluation, or is it just the best evaluation we can and should be doing? And I don't know if I've ever got an answer to that. And I know you're relatively new in the field, but Nicola, do you have any thoughts?
I guess maybe the only thing that I would probably say would be yes, a lot of these things should be best practice and already being performed. And in some cases, which I'm a little bit more familiar with community-based participatory research, they are being performed, but there's this key aspect in there, and we've talked about this before, of reciprocity, just making sure that for every stakeholder that is giving their time to help with push this evaluation forward, or even other like evaluation research forward, that they're being properly compensated in ways that they perceive is beneficial and stuff to them. So then that way, when they leave this study or when they leave the program and stuff that they're participating in, they feel like they are able to, that they actually not only had a hand in developing whatever that evaluation was going to look like, but it benefits them and what their goals are and stuff kind of moving into the future.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, absolutely. But, and I think that's where I might be biased too, having a background in community-based participatory research, that although I feel like CRE goes above and beyond in a few different ways, probably only because it's evaluation. But yeah, this idea of not only authentic involvement, but that your participants or the people involved, stakeholders, should be respected enough to get paid, have their voice trusted, have their voice lifted up by doing the program. It's just interesting. I wonder if we had talked to a seasoned evaluator or somebody that's been doing this for 20 years or something, if this was not a normal part of one's evaluation education. Or I could just be completely ignorant and CRE is entirely different. And I just don't know. Anyway, if you figure it out, let me know.
There are lots of questions that can be asked. It's funny because I see that they focus on the process and I see that they focus on the results, but I would have loved to see if they could show, and maybe they touch on this in a few places, but like how important it is to have culturally based evaluation surrounding formative like evaluation research.
Huh. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back after I'm not sure if they did mention that, or maybe they just didn't draw it distinct. I don't know, but yeah, it's a good question. It would have been nice to have that called out explicitly. Good point. Well, I only have one more question. And this was hopefully for other people that have used this, because I haven't, like I said, well, I guess that's why I added this parentheses. When have you used CRE or evaluations with CRE components? How did you use the evaluation or results? And I guess I can only speak to the CRE components. But I guess anytime you've done CBPR, have you noticed that process use where people have learned or benefited from just going through the process of evaluation?
Ironically, yes. It's funny because for my final project is, I guess for my MPH, there was a project that I was working on specifically. Are you familiar with Clarkston, Georgia?
With Clarkston, Georgia?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a lot of people don't know, but Clarkston, Georgia is like right in DeKalb County, right outside of Atlanta. It's actually a gateway city and a settlement city for a lot of refugee populations that are coming inside of the United States. So I was working with a professor who teaches a lot of refugee students on the Georgia State campus there. And she, in partnership with Emory Global Health Institute, had received some funds from CDC to try to develop programs for the different groups in that area. And it was funny because initially they were thinking of all these wonderful programs and solutions, and then they recognized there's no one actually here from the community to give their input as to what programs they actually want. So I worked with her to help design a little mini 1-day research exposition, community engagement exposition, but then also it included qualitative data collecting where they invited members of the community and different spokespeople from that community, including the mayor, different research organizations, but then also different nonprofit organizations to come together to specifically have 6 different breakout sessions focused on different topic areas that community members would be really interested in. So that included women's health, legal aid, I think maybe insurance, financial, economic resources. It was a couple of others. And they use those as qualitative focus groups to see, okay, we want to hear directly from community members. What do you guys want if you were to try to find solutions to the problems and stuff that are specifically in your community? The irony and the one critique of the conference that some people had was that there weren't enough community members there. But for the ones that were there, I was ironically surprised that a lot of them were already doctors and nurse practitioners and other members in nonprofit organizations that found value in the conference because they were able to meet with other like-minded individuals and figure out ways to push their community initiatives forward. So I found that to be really, really great benefit of, oh, they got to participate in part of the process of contributing what they felt like they wanted, but then also team up with other conference participants to see, okay, how can we come together to push change?
Wow. Yeah, no, that's a perfect example right there. Yeah, it sounds like then there was even a few benefits to them besides going through the process. They got to expand their network. They got to learn about the different programs and pieces that were out there. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Trying to think, and I feel like there's a couple stories here, but once again, I don't know if it raises to the level of a CRE, but I used to do work. It was actually my first few years of doing evaluation. It was with a nonprofit, a grassroots student empowerment program. And it was similar with what we did, right? That their empowerment program was really just not just to diminish it, but it focused a lot on political activism for improving their neighborhood, of their local community. But whether or not they knew it or not, that's duplicative there. But them going through the process of evaluating it or gathering their own data. One of the big projects they have is a photo voice where they go around and take pictures of their community and what it means, and then use that to create narratives. I think they ended up sending them to the mayor and trying to schedule a meeting with him. It was like a whole thing. I think we got her back. Yay. But yeah, now I didn't get to track these folks after they left, but these types of evaluations in the program had been going on for years. But talking to alumni of this program, where they had continued on doing, being political activists, because going through this process of figuring out how not to just measure and explain the issues in their community, it provided a benefit that seems to last a decade, 2 decades later. So I think that's interesting. Well, thank you for hopping back on. This was our last discussion question, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts about it. before we call it a day?
No, but sorry, my internet went out, so I was trying to restart my modem.
It's okay. Mine went down. I had a meeting this morning at 9 o'clock and I got on at 9:15 because my internet just was not having it. It's okay. So yeah, final thoughts on this. Yeah, it's just, like I said, I think the article did a really good job delineating these different types of uses, explaining why people decided that culturally responsive evaluation was important. And I think there is something to be said for this idea that CRE seems to be really common when the use for the evaluation isn't in the results of the evaluation. Although I have no doubt they're important, but I'm just going off what the author said, that the process use, that going through the process of evaluation was beneficial to the stakeholders and participants. That was just a much more common type of response. So if there's ever a time when you need to consider the process and use that process to benefit the folks involved, probably CRE is the way to go. Any other closing final thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Well, if you all get bored, next month, it's already on the calendar, but I'll be presenting actually over my own article. So I'm excited about that. First time I get to do that here. So that's an evaluation of the CDC funded program through the Division of STD Prevention's National Network of STD Clinical Prevention Training Centers. 3 years of evaluation data and all that jazz. So I'm looking forward to talking about it, but if you can join me, if not, or if you can join me, great. If not, it'll be recorded in case you get bored. So, but that's all I got for today. Thanks for joining me, folks.
Of course. Talk to you later, Chris.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.